She did. That's right. Okay. The book that I read for this project was Ceremony, and I found it like really, really interesting for the reason that I think a lot of people can relate to it. Beyond the war, it goes about like the theme that someone should cope with something and the way that people cope with stuff. So after, like, I think any of us could think of a time where we've gone through something really difficult, like a family member dies, or you know, you go through a breakup or whatever, and there's a way that you cope. You either like go running, you do exercise, you play soccer, whatever. In the ceremony, Teo, the main character, he's a prisoner, prisoner of Japanese during the World War II, and he goes through these like really horrible experiences, and they hurt him mentally. And when he comes back to Laguna, where he's from, he's Native American. He feels just like he doesn't want to live anymore. He's like, I don't want to do this. It's really difficult for me to think back on these moments where I was a prisoner of war, and it's very like morbid. And his cousins and stuff, they find some type of relief in drinking. So they spend their time drinking and smoking, and they just laugh it off. But Teo doesn't feel that that's right. He's like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to drink. I don't want to lose myself in alcohol. That's not anything that I want to do. I want to find something more in myself. And that's why I think it's so interesting, because it's a Native American's perspective. So it takes you back into ceremonies and like his traditions and their beliefs and all that stuff. Okay, next slide. Okay, yeah. So I read this, I was reading, and I read this quote. I wasn't looking for quotes, I was just reading, and I really liked it. It says, jungle rain had no beginning or end. It grew like foliage from the sky. So what I'm doing here is I'm relating it back to war. So it had no beginning or end. It grew like foliage from the sky. So it just continued to grow. It had no beginning, no end. Branching and arching to the earth. So it took over people, like when earth kind of relates back to people. And sometimes in the solid that gets entangling the island. So I took that as like taking opposing sides. And the reason why I put this picture was it relates back to the quote in the way that it's nature. But then also, you've all heard the saying, some of you, where the best apples are always at the top and the rotten ones are at the bottom. And well, like the best apples are the hardest to get, and they're at the top. And that kind of relates back to the war, because it's really like this part right here is all dark, and then up here it's better. So war is kind of like you have to find some type of way to cope with it, and branching out and finding more in yourself is better than keeping to something that's at the bottom. And like, this is where the people, his cousins, are at when they're drinking, and this is him trying to find himself and find some type of way to cope through his beliefs. So his grandma told him this: but as long as you remember what you have seen, then nothing is gone. As long as you remember, it is part of this story we have together. She's saying, remember your roots. Like, this is who you are, and as long as you always this is a traumatic experience that you went through, you need to just continue with it. This is I think him like very troubled, and then he's trying to figure out himself through his traditions, through his cousins, through the war. And this is just like all these sides of him pulling him apart, and he's just kind of like in a knot. He doesn't know where to go. He's kind of lost. Eventually he finds himself, and he finds coping in his traditions and his beliefs. But a bigger theme than that is sorry, I'm really nervous. I had like something really good. Well, you're trying to cope, and reason why this tree is leafless is because that's how Tayo feels. He feels that he doesn't have, because of his traumatic experience, he doesn't have the will and power to continue his life. And his roots are very well engraved. Like, I saw the branch of the trunk of the tree as that's like how you grew up, and that's what's holding you up. But at the same time, he's not full of life, not yet. He feels sorry, and he just looks at the rest of the people and feels depressed for them because they're not doing anything with their lives. They're just kind of so sad about the war that they can't even continue to like process half the information or like be sober. So he's this is just like comparing back to Tayo. Like, he doesn't have life. He's still stuck in some type of place where he can't cope with anything. And eventually in the ceremony, whenever he does perform the ceremony, it's when he's able to move on. And that's it.